tell me where he is?
He's everywhere. Everywhere. He's sitting at your desk, he's kissing your lover, he's eating supper with your family.
Give us the first memory that comes to your mind, okay? Could be a long story, could be one word. Spectre.
We did the biggest explosion in movie history out in the Moroccan desert. I don't know if we told the Moroccan government that we were doing it. All I know is that Léa Seydoux and I were standing there, and we basically, they were on our back and they rolled the camera, and this thing started blowing up, and I could feel Léa just leaping further backwards, and I was just going, stay in shot, we can't do this again, we can't do this again. Wow. I mean, it was terrifying. It was like, I mean, this thing just rose up, and the percussion on your face, it was remarkable, and kind of incredibly moving in a weird way. Yeah.
Part of the reason we thought about this episode was because Chris finally finished Spectre. So I'll have to start with him, and part of your, what I want to hear from you, Chris, is, should Sam Mendes have come back?
No. I think the issue that I had, so after the like I say, Skyfall, really enjoyed that at the cinema. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was the marketing. I don't know if it felt cynical. It was like, now we've got the rights back to Blofeld and Spectre. That's the next film. Screw any other plans that we've got to use that straight away. But that was the first Bond film I didn't see at the cinema. Yeah, I just when I did get around to see it, I was just, it felt lifeless. It felt like the plot was, well, it would get to the obviously the main plot at the end with Blofeld. I just felt like it was just a series of scenes that went far too long. Like, it felt like that scene could have caught like 30 seconds before. Like, it feels like it's just like it's the first sort of, when you compare it to like what John Glenn, his films, which like as soon as the dialogue almost ends, you're in the next scene, the dialogue starts to it just moves so quickly. So yeah, Spectre, I just found it to be joyless. I found it to be empty. I really struggled when I first saw it, and I was just, it felt, let's say, really long, really baggy. And then, again, like all Bond films, there's always something to like. Some of the locations, the stuff in Austria, I remember enjoying that. The opening on paper was a great idea, but the one take trick, I feel like it does. Again, I think it's a gimmick that doesn't quite work. Yeah, it was always one that I was sort of, when I went back to rewatch, and that was the one I sort of dreaded the most, just because it felt like hard work getting through it. It felt like, gosh, this is long, it's slow, it doesn't pay off. I feel like the writing themselves into knots and into painting themselves into everything in it. By the end of it, it's like, what on earth is going on? Why is there photocopies of people in the building? Why is that? It was first time around, I'm really frustrated by it. And then obviously I tried to, and I went back to watch it again, and then I'd get through, 40 minutes, and I would just often actually towards sort of Austria, I can't, and I ended up turning it off. And it became a bit of a running joke.
Turn this off. This is important.
I said, turn it off!
It became this running joke of me trying to start watching Spectre, because obviously, you hear what everyone else thinks, and a lot of us, even in our chat, were like, "Oh, I really like Spectre," because some people say it's actually the most traditional, Bond film, of the Daniel Craig one. There's more humor injected in it. It has all these different things that people really like about it, and I was like almost determined to actually like it, but I couldn't crack. It just wouldn't work for me. And then the other week, I thought, no, I'm going to sit down and give it another go. And I watched it all, in one. And, again, there's a lot of stuff that I don't like, and there's a lot of faults in it. And the plot twist is, honestly, it is so poor that I cannot believe that professional writers were paid for this plot point. I find it, honestly, it makes me sort of almost cross when I think about what they did with that.
My little brother. They formed quite an attachment. So, you killed him? Yes, I did.
But there was a lot. I say there was a lot that I liked. I could start to see, Daniel Craig's performance a little bit lighter. There's some humor in there. Like I say the locations, the amount of money that obviously clearly you can see on screen works really well. On one hand, you get, the character of Hinks, who's a great character, but then he's wasted. Monica Bellucci's in it finally. Obviously wanted her in Tomorrow Never Dies. Again, wasted. She's in it for what? 2-3 minutes screen time, just sort of views dropped to one side.
Well, I can tell you that I don't trust you.
Well, then you have impeccable instincts.
If you don't leave now, we'll die together.
I can think of worse ways to go.
Then you're obviously crazy, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Like all Bond films, there's a lot to like. That's the one that I do struggle with the most. I'm getting ahead of myself now, actually. No, tomorrow. No, that is the one that I struggle with the most. But yeah, Spectre is this. I just genuinely kind of struggle with it. There's a lot of stuff that I can't get on with it. But the more I watch it, the more I get to appreciate certain points and certain bits of it. But for me, it's just that plot point it will never be a favorite of mine, because I cannot get past the logic. I cannot get past that kind of that poor writing. But there's a lot of stuff that to be liked, and I think that and it's a shame because when they cast Christoph Waltz, I was like, I was quite excited. He was no thought for a second he wasn't anyone other than Blofeld, but fair enough. But I think he's great. Again, wasted.
Franz Oberhauser died 20 years ago, James, in an avalanche alongside his father. The man you're talking to now, the man inside your head, is Ernst Stavro Blofeld.
The ending is, just some of the plot points, like why you're being chased by a boat, why as a helicopter you flying across the river, you just go over just move away from the river. But anyway, that's how I felt. So yeah, last time I watched it, I was less cross. I've still got a lot of work to do, as you can tell, with that dealing with it. But
part of the healing process. Is anyone here able to defend the Brofelds? Would anyone have been like, yeah, I'm up for that?
No.
Go on, Steve. You were going to say something.
No, I mean, I was just going to echo Chris's feelings on the film. It is, for me, each time I watch it, it's like I'm just watching a cutting floor edit of all of the other films.
Yeah.
If you think about, we start with Daniel Craig, a skeleton costume with a top hat. Where have I seen that before? Live and Let Die. He goes up onto the rooftops and then he's going to take aim at somebody across the street through some glass.
Yeah.
License to Kill. And the film just sort of goes, at the end he's chasing somebody down the River Thames in a boat. Where have I seen that before? And the whole film for me was just a lot of... Skyfall did a lot of the tipping of the hat, and that was fine because it was the 50th anniversary. But Spectre was also still tipping the hat to the rest of the franchise as well by rehashing a lot of the scenes that we'd already seen in previous films. And it wasn't needed because this should have been just another Bond film rather than an anniversary film. So, but having said that, I would say I do like it as a film. I do like the whole blowing up of MI6. I mean, where have we seen that before? But it just goes on and on and on. But I do like the action sequence where it's a real race against time for Bond to get into MI6, to find Madeline, to rescue her, and then get out. I think that was, in terms of an action film, that was absolutely great. Followed by The World Is Not Enough again down the Thames, and then shooting down a helicopter with a pistol. But those bits I can ignore because I actually, I like the relationship between what's become our new sort of like MI6 team Obviously it features a lot of London. I adore London, and obviously the little quips with sea and whatnot I thought were quite humorous. So it did have quite a good balance.
So sorry, am I interrupting? Not remotely. 007, I'd like you to meet Max Denby, head of the Joint Security Service. Well, it's a pleasure to finally meet you, 007. I've heard a lot about you. Most of it good.
Congratulations on your new appointment.
Thank you.
Suppose we should call you C now?
No. Max, please.
No, I think I'll call you C. C.
As you wish.
But overall, when I watch it, I do feel like it is just a rehash of all of the previous Bond films that we've seen. And it wasn't necessary. I would have liked something a bit more original.
You could do a quick little refine of it. Just Christoph Waltz is introduced as Blofeld. All really good. I love all that scene, the meeting of Spectre.
Yeah.
And then maybe you don't see him again until the next film, if they'd planned it. And then C, who it doesn't get talked about an awful lot. I think Andrew Scott would have been a good main villain, maybe for this one. I know some people say maybe Monica Bellucci could have been the villain, but that you'd have to change quite a bit, I think. And yeah, you didn't have to do everything to the nth degree. Madeline didn't have to be the daughter of Mr. White. There's so many.
It all ties up very, very nicely, doesn't it? And the whole bromance between, the fact that they were brothers, I think the same way they've given us a bit of history with Skyfall and his family home, they've thought, right, what other bit of background can we give to this character that will add some gravity and that will be new? And say, well, okay, fine, they were brothers. We know that Bond's his parents died in a climbing accident, so maybe tie it into something like that, the adoption papers and whatnot. And it all seemed to end very nicely, and very tidily. If you get everything tied in, everything was interlinked, and I don't think it needed to be. I don't think they needed to mention that, Blofeld's father raised Bond. That added nothing to it other than making his sort of Blofeld's reasoning for hating Bond a bit sort of cheap and pathetic.
Yeah.
The whole cuckoo thing I thought was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. They do the same error again for me in No Time to Die, where based on the conversation with Bond and Madeline and the train, that's the pre-title sequence, isn't it? The flashback to their upbringing. And it's like, is there anyone, even the most diehard Craig fans? I'm not saying you have to defend it. I don't mind watching it at all. I think it does. It's got more enjoyable as time has gone on, and I think like someone like my wife could easily watch it much more than some of the other ones as a throw-on Bond. So I do think it has some good qualities. It's just those frustrations, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. I can't disagree with anything. As a matter of fact, this is the one I would be most critical of. Not to say that I agree with you. Like this is one that I would easily throw on. Like it came out like, coming off my favorite Bond film, this was super, big and important, and I was very excited about it. And then I think when I got it on Blu-ray and kind of added it to my digital library, like I had my second child at the time, so I remember holding my newborn and like watching it on my tablet trying to stay awake, not because it was boring, but because I was tired with the newborn. But I was just like, it was on, like it was something I wanted to watch. So I enjoy it. I will gladly throw it on anytime. But yeah, there are just things that are head scratchers. There's no need to make Blofeld that personal. Just make him Blofeld. And even if you're gonna do the weird name switch, I kind of wished that it seems like more in character for Daniel Craig's Bond to say, call him Franz, but then when he says like, no, my name's Blofeld, just be like, no, I'm not calling you Blofeld. You're Franz. You're gonna deal with it. That's gonna be a little dig at you to make because we know each other and I don't like you. I wish he would have just not called him Blofeld.
Yeah.
And kind of annoyed him by calling him Franz. And then I think, Chris had mentioned, Sam Mendes not coming back. Like I genuinely think Thomas Newman shouldn't have come back. It's just they recycle Skyfall's score. And I'm sitting here thinking like, why did you just copy and paste? Like there's new stuff in there. But for the most part, just like that pre-title sequence, I'm like, this is the part where he jumps through the window in the motorcycle. Like, what are we doing? Like, there's a lot of stuff that I think is just phoned in. And yeah, it's just there are a few missteps there after such a high of Skyfall to kind of phone it in on a few areas is a question for me. But there are things I like. I think there's some good character growth. I was thinking about Q in particular because in Skyfall, what were you expecting? An exploding pin? We don't really go in for that anymore. But I think, after he gets hacked by Silva, I think he's humbled a little bit, whether or not they intended for that. But I kind of read it into, okay, well, maybe there is something to be said for an exploding watch and a car with gadgets. So I think in Skyfall, he's humbled a little bit. He kind of goes that direction and he kind of leans into the old school Q branch a little bit.
Ah, 007.
Q?
Please excuse the mess. Everything's a little bit up in the air, what with the changes and all. Couple of things to get through. Shall we get started?
And then with Mallory, I think, when he tells him, we can't hide in the shadows. There are no more shadows. And he's like, oh no, Silva is in the shadows. And then you get Spectre with the Nine Eyes initiative. He's like, oh, dadgum, like there are things at play that I can't foresee or explain or predict. And so that kind of leads him into going the wrong direction with something like Heracles, for example. I think there are things involved with the characters that I think there's a little bit of character growth there, whether or not that's there intentionally or if I'm throwing that in there, I'm happy to make that headcanon. But that's kind of how I read it. But by and large, it's my least favorite Craig. It probably floats around 18, 19, something like that. But that's not to say I don't like it. I think, just because it's low doesn't mean I don't enjoy it.
I've never realised that as well. It's a bit poor, isn't it? Another villain called Franz.
What? Right. Yeah.
What?
I like watching Spectre. I've heard a lot of people say that they find it boring and they find it slow. That has never ever been my experience. And the first time I watched it, I've always found it an enjoyable watch. And I might be in the minority of that. As I think about it, I think the reasons why I find it an enjoyable watch is because it's, to me, probably the most traditional of the Daniel Craig films in terms of James Bond films. So, firstly, you've got a gun barrel at the start. You've got an excellent pre-title sequence, which is reasonably separated from the story. Within that, you've got the old school idea of a villain exclusively for a pre-title sequence. You've got a henchman in Mr. Hinks, and you've got a brilliant fight with him on the train. You've got great Bondian locations, some of them very familiar, Tangier, for example, some of them brand new, Rome, Vatican. You've got a car that's exclusive to this film. A lot of this period, we've had a lot of like DB5 stuff. We've just got our own car for this film. We've got a villain's lair, proper old school villain's hideout. So there's lots and lots of stuff within Spectre that I find have those kind of tropes, those Bonding tropes that makes me feel like I'm watching a Bond film. So I do naturally default to coming back to the places that I enjoy watching this. However, there are so many issues inside the film that I could never disagree with anybody who would criticise it. Some of them to me I can get over, some of them to me I can't. The one that I struggle with the most by far, which I think everyone will think about, is the return of Blofeld himself as James Bond's stepbrother, and retconning the previous three films into basically it's him wanting revenge on Bond because Daddy loved him more. And the fact that that was like parodied in Austin Powers probably 20 years earlier, which are films that are parodies of James Bond, and the writers actually thought that this would be a good idea, is unforgivable, really, and causes a lot of damage not only to this film but actually to the whole Daniel Craig era. Now I say this when I first came out of the cinema, the first time I watched it, it was only when I sat down and thought about those issues after that I realised how bad that they were. When I was watching the film, I actually enjoyed it, you know, and that is the similar thing each time. I still enjoy the film, but I do realise how silly it is. And then when you start thinking about, well, the damage it causes to the quantum aspect, quantum's binned off, but then you start adding the fact that Raoul Silva's involved in this as well. And the problem with all this is that we're supposed to believe that Blofeld is the author of this pain over all of it. And for me, he is the worst villain in the whole series. Firstly, don't like his origin story. I really don't believe that Bond would just call him Blofeld straight after that name's been introduced. If these two people knew each other from their childhood and Bond knew that, you know, he was trying to get away from that Oberhauser thing, it'd be quite an easy thing for Bond to wind him up by continually calling Franz or Oberhauser, and it'd just be a way of knocking back. But there's none of that at all. The Cats just comes out of nowhere. But the problem is that with each Blofeld, there is something that defines them. So I'd say Donald Pleasance, probably of the visible Blofelds, has that omniscience, you know, omnipresence, if you like, in terms of in the volcano when he is at everyone's command. Savalas is certainly the physical Blofeld. Charles Gray is the campy Blofeld. But what is Christoph Waltz? It's like they decided that Christoph Waltz, they would cast him because they saw Inglourious Bastards and they saw how good Colonel Hans Landa was in that film, with the idea of, we'll bring the monologues in and then that eerie feel, but at the end of the monologue, something awful always happens. He's 2 steps ahead and the monologue is actually just to delay the inevitable. But because that's an 18, they can push the boundaries of how shocking the things he does is. This is a 12A, and yet they decide they'll keep the monologue aspect for Blofeld, but they can't do anything shocking. Now, they could do things more shocking than they do, even with the age restrictions, but it just comes across as that you've actually just got a really boring Blofeld who rambles on, but doesn't have that much to give.
Can't tell you how much I've been looking forward to this. All of us here together. A reunion.
And it's incredibly anticlimactic, both in terms of how Bond actually gets off his island with the explosion, and even more so how Bond shoots down a helicopter with a pistol. And that's the thing, I think, why people are very unforgiven, is because I think that Sam Mendes, who's a well-renowned director, thinks this is more than a Bond film. He's directing a critically acclaimed film. And because you're doing that, you've got to take the rough with the smooth. And if you're going to put loopholes in it, they are going to be highlighted more than if you were, say, watching something like Man with the Golden Gun, which is a great film, but very zany in its approach, and it knows what it is. And I think that that is one of the massive aspects of Spectre. I think as well, one of the other issues is that whilst I still really enjoy it, Sam Mendes' direction of action really suffers in this film. The idea of a car, two supercars chasing through Rome in the middle of a night, climaxing in the Vatican City, should be such a thrill. And yet, we're supposed to believe this without any other cars being there in the capital city of Italy. There's exposition going on while the car chase is going on. And if you're going to have a car chase in a film, it's got to be the focus.
Last unconfirmed sighting, Alta Sea in Austria, 4 months ago.
Hold that thought.
Another one is the actual Bond driving the plane through the hut at the Hofner Clinic. The idea of a plane going through a hut and crashing down a hill is so Bondy and it's untrue, but it's not directed in a way that brings the action to the forefront, and it just lacks that punch, shall we say, that this scene should have. The other issue I kind of have with the film is the unevenness of Daniel Craig's performance. Certain parts of it, he looks like he's enjoying himself more than ever. And again, that's that Bondian feel. Pre-title sequence, walking across the ledge with the skeleton outfit on. It's very campy. It's as near to Roger Moore as Daniel Craig's ever got. But then you've got this really kind of, I don't know how to, belligerent, disrespectful nature to Ralph Fiennes' Q, which it's not that Bond has defied the orders of M in the past. Sorry, Ralph Fiennes M, not Ralph Fiennes Q. He's defied them many times before. But if he defies M's orders, he does it. He doesn't give some cocky quip. He gets on with it because he knows the job needs to be done, and he gets on with it. Perfect example, Living Daylights. Great example of it. But here we get this kind of smug, you've had a hard day, sir.
You're right, sir. You have got a tricky day.
And that, to me, automatically makes James Bond a bit dislikable. And when you've got this contrast of some of the most likeable bits and some of the most dislikable bits in the same film, it really, it's a tension. It grates against each other. It doesn't complement each other. I did say in the review, I think Spectre would have been a better film if it was the third one and Skyfall was the final one. There obviously there'd have to be a lot of changing around of bits and stuff, but I do think that Spectre can tie in Casino Royale and Quantum far better than it can do Skyfall. It doesn't do it as well as it could, but it can do that. And I do like the ending. I think the ending is very Bondian. I think the idea of Daniel Craig driving away with Madeline Swan is a great ending in the DB5, and actually would have been a lovely bookend to the end of the series. So whilst I say, I want Skyfall next, I do agree that if you're going to have Spectre as your fourth one, that is the best place to end it. If Daniel Craig's era had ended there with him driving off in an Aston Martin DB5, I think his era would be looked upon far, far, far more favourably now. With all the other actors, we have the benefit of hindsight. We can look at things retrospectively, even with potential nostalgia. And if that had have happened then, we'd have looked back now 10 years on, isn't it, next year, and we'd have gone, that was a nice end to Craig. That was a nice end, and all in all, he's had a really good run at this. But because of what we get next with Daniel Craig in No Time to Die, being the only ever time that a film is deliberately written as a swan song for a Bond actor, it leaves me thinking a lot more about what if with Spectre, with that ending, and if that was it, we'd have been great. Now, the other side is I prefer Spectre to No Time to Die by some distance. But I think in the grand scheme of how it plays with all Daniel Craig's films, it would have been much better if it was the fourth and final film, or the third film with Skyfall fourth. The fact that No Time to Die comes after it is to its detriment.
Right, Harry, I've no idea what you think of Spectre. I've just realised I've never heard you really mention it on the podcast. I'm sure you love it, don't
you? Well, I do. I've always quite liked the pre-title sequence, and then having recently rewatched it, love the pre-title sequence with the helicopter onwards. I do feel like, Chris, that the one shot is a gimmick that does nothing for me. I'm jumping all over the place here, but we're in a good position after Skyfall, and then when you hear that they've got the rights to Spectre, and you see some early photos of Bond in the snow, you think they're doing it. They're embracing being Bond again. They've got all these hallmarks that you've been wanting, and we're going to move forward. Like I say, you've got that great pre-title sequence, which is pretty exciting. I didn't really like the song much. I thought it was a bad rehash of Skyfall, really. It's grown on me a little bit since, and I do like it in a way. But then you've got M, which is really good. You've got Ralph Fiennes as M, which I do like. Bond seems more relaxed in the role again, which is another positive. you know, you've got this stuff in the snow with aeroplanes. You've got Hinks as a henchman, which is exciting and traditional. There's just a point after that when it just starts to slow down, and you start to notice things that were also in Skyfall a little bit, where it becomes a little bit too proud of its cinematography and gets a little bit arrogant, thinking that it can linger on things, thinking it can be slow, thinking that it can be pensive and arty, and it just gets more and more. I loved the introduction of Blofeld at that table. I thought that was excellent. I think that's really good. Cuckoo. But after that, it gets slow and boring, I would say. And the stuff with Blofeld being his brother is utterly preposterous. The relationship with Madeline isn't that great. It's not based on much. And for some reason, it does seem like there's an awkward age gap there.
Don't think for one moment. This is where I fall into your arms, seeking solace for my dead daddy.
Then the climax is not for me very good. It's really disappointing. And like Chris, after Skyfall, I think there's some kind of lazy expectation that they'd be able to just carry on winning people's hearts, people enjoying it without much creative effort, some pretty bad writing, and I think its biggest crime, Blofeld is probably its biggest crime, but whereas I've got some issues with Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, and Skyfall to an extent, they were pretty exciting. They're all exciting, those three. The biggest crime of this one is it's boring. I find it really quite flat and boring, and it gets progressively boring as you watch it, which is such a shame. I do think they just expected that everyone would like it, because of Skyfall, trying to kind of ride the successes of that. I'm sorry to bring it down a little bit, after being, because it's just, the frustrating thing is, like I said, they were in such a good position after Skyfall, and they got access to Spectre and just splurged it all immediately, basically. I'm sorry.
Nikolai, come on. I know you're not. I'm not sure what your thoughts are. Probably not much more better.
Good fight with Hinks. Good fight with Hinks on the train.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a really good fight scene. I don't think my biggest problem with Spectre is Mendes. I think he does make some mistakes in terms of how he chooses to let certain sequences not be exciting or as exciting as they should be. I think that the car chase is probably one of the most boring car chases on an action level in the series. I hate that the sort of really big explosion at Blofeld's lair, which is like the biggest explosion on film or something like that, just looks so small. It just sort of baffles me that they chose to shoot it that way. But I think the biggest problem is definitely the script, because I think the movie is mostly solid until they get to Blofeld's lair, and then things start unraveling. And I think I remember reading that they had a different plan originally in terms of who Blofeld was supposed to be and how he was, or he or she, I'm not even sure, was supposed to be connected to Bond. And then there were these, Sony email leaks at the time. I think that was going on, and then they sort of rewrote some of that stuff very quickly, which I think was a big mistake. And it just ends up being, it starts off pretty good. I remember actually showing Spectre to my brother, who's again not the biggest Daniel Craig Bond fan, and it started off really well. I actually remember when Bond is falling down on that couch in the pre-title sequence. I remember my brother being like, "Oh, that's such a Bond moment," it kept being pretty good until the sort of climax, and then my brother was like, "Oh well, it's not so great now." So it kind of leaves you off on a bit of a sour taste. It's not one that I hate, but it's not the one that I like to put on a lot. It's probably also like number 19 or 20 for me in my ranking, I guess.
I absolutely love this opening sequence. Absolutely love it. It's desperately Bond, and the music's brilliant. The execution of the entire thing is brilliant. Craig's Bond is brilliant, and everything about it is brilliant. We've got an auxiliary villain getting his comeuppance. It's absolutely great. And then, for great periods of the film, the wheels just cataclysmically explode off in all various directions. That said, I still enjoyed great parts of this, really did. At times, it's the most traditional Bond fun, you know, that I can remember. So Sam Smith's song is, I can't work out whether it's brilliant, I can't work out whether it's hilariously bad, I've got no idea. This is probably marred by the fact that my brother did an incredible falsetto rendition of this at karaoke for my mum's birthday around the time it came out. Don't know how my mum felt about it, but it really did make an impression. But I just, like, there's so much of it I really enjoy. There really is. I think, again, we are hamstrung in fully rooting for this James Bond because of some of the choices that are made. And I feel at times it's getting very obvious here with just how much power the actor Daniel Craig has. And this isn't necessarily a criticism, I just feel it looks quite clear at times that he is part of the decision-making process and tends to get his way quite a bit. The treatment of Monica Bellucci by the script, by Bond, by the filmmakers really isn't good. Really isn't good. And this follows on another trope that this James Bond has of being absolutely ghastly with women. Ghastly. Not following on from this thing that we're told that, hey, James Bond's grown up, he's a 21st century man who respects... No, he doesn't. He gets them killed left, right and centre after using them for sex and information. Now, I know that's what, you know, the Fleming purists will say, yes, but that's what James Bond is all about. Yes, but that doesn't mean I have to like it, you know, or have to want to see that. Or, you know, if you just told me, perhaps, that, oh, James Bond is up to, you know, he's up to his old tricks of perhaps not being the best guy ever, but gosh, we love him, I'd have gone along with that, I think. Not, oh, he's a grown-up James Bond, he's a sensitive James Bond, he's a James Bond for the modern time. He really isn't. He's worse than ever. He's absolutely worse than ever. I think, you know, the business with that this film gets so messed up over is the sudden Brofeld. I mean, it's so shoehorned in, and it's one of the most lazy and ineffectual ways of bringing in the huge property of Spectre itself. I don't mean the movie, I mean like the organisation. It's so lazily handled for me. And they've gone for very basic screenwriting decisions, like, well, how can we make this relevant to Bond? I mean, why should he care about this? Oh, it's his brother. This is Blofeld. After all this time, is his brother. It's just, it's like, it feels like writing with boxing gloves on, and you're just ham-fistedly smashing the keyboard and hoping that you're going to land on some pathos or emotional payoff, and it doesn't work. It plainly doesn't work. And we feel like we've been, because after Quantum and Quantum, whatever Quantum is, still don't know, you know, having watched the movie recently, not got a clue what Quantum is or what they do, but only that we have people everywhere. What does that even mean? Then, you know, what is their connection to Spectre? And Spectre comes across as desperately non-threatening in this film. I mean, it's like basically a Masonic event. And Bond arrives at one, and they look at him funny, and they seem to, you know, there's so much of like, you know, they're really threatening, I promise you they're really bad, they're really naughty, but we never see any of it. we don't see any of that really. At least not that I can remember, or anything that was indelible. I mean, like, think about the handling of Spectre in Thunderball. Like, they're like literally zapping callously members of their board that don't behave well. You know, and I know that like there's elements of that in this, but again, we're told so much and we're expected as an audience to believe all this, and it's impossible to. It's impossible to. Further to that, then you've got the shenanigans with Madeline Swan, who comes along, and I've got nothing against Léa Seydoux at all. I think she's a fantastic actor, and I think the role of Madeline is utterly thankless because it's written so badly, and their relationship is written so badly. You're expected to believe that they are voluminously in love with each other in the scant amount of screen time that they have, and for me none of it comes off, and everything that goes on from this point hinges on this. If it's to work, this narrative they're going for, it has to hinge on this.
I love you.
And for me, it just absolutely doesn't. And they go through a lot of that. They want us to believe it because outside of the movie, they're telling us these things. Hey, yes, James Bond's going to really fall in love this time. He really falls in love this time. But you can't just tell us that. You have to do it on the screen. You have to show us on the screen. And they just haven't done it. And it renders everything that comes kind of useless and rote and meaningless. And it's such a sadness because they were so close to doing something amazing. Again, it's not Craig. No Craig hate. It's the writing, which I think has gone to a point where it's been sort of vacuumed back up the screenwriter's bottoms, and it's just as bad as you can imagine at this stage. The fact is that they're actively trading on a 60-year, well, at this point it was 55, wasn't it? 55-odd year franchise. They're trading upon that so that you care, when in fact you should be making us care on the screen. You know, with Honor Majesties, they made us care about Tracy in the moment on that screen. They didn't tell us about it. They didn't make us do it, as in like go on about it until, yeah, kind of, am I sort of hoodwinked into believing this now? I don't know, am I? Then we get to this brilliant stuff at the clinic. I love all of that stuff. Bond going there. He's being a bit of a spy and a cad here, isn't he? Enjoying all this.
Here you are, sir. One prolific digestive enzyme shake.
Do me a favor, will you? Throw that down the toilet. Cut out the middleman.
No escape.
And then we get to comes back to London, and it's this absolute nonsense with the amazing Andrew Scott, who I feel is completely wasted, and it's all about photocopying people's faces and sticking them up in an empty building. And there's a great bit with a helicopter crashing in the street, isn't there? But none of it is landing. It's impressive, very impressive, but none of it is landing because the story hasn't done the hard work. The writing of this hasn't done the hard work to make us care enough about what's going on. And this is where James Bond, sadly, this incarnation of James Bond, is sliding into schmaltz and soap opera, and pulling at heartstrings that they've got no right to even try to reach. I like Spectre in all sorts of ways, really do, in all sorts of ways, but this is where we're getting silly, isn't it? A bit silly.
I find Spectre really frustrating. I remember when the trailer for it dropped, they had made this big deal about, the car chase. And then in the trailer, you see the, bits of the car chase, and then they play that, the On Her Majesty's Secret Service theme. And I was like, okay, all right, this is, we're going to get something really great here. Like Harry said, I think Spectre's biggest crime is that it's just boring. It's just boring. And I don't particularly like Bond's character in it as well. He just seems a bit I think he just seems a bit mean-spirited a little bit. Madeline, she pulled a Lupe, where she all of a sudden is in love with Bond. On the when does she say it? I think when he says when he goes off, when they're back in London, the torture scene, he comes up, he gets tortured. And then he recovers miraculously and is just shooting everybody like he's on God mode on Call of Duty.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm just like, wow,
Great doing
okay.
it though. Yeah.
The Spectre meeting, I thought that was good. Monica Bellucci is always a delight. She was one of the better things about the film. What else? I mean, there's not. To be honest, I don't really like talking about the film because
Move on.
yeah, it's not for me. The film's not for me. I don't hate it, but I just don't rate it. One of the things I'm also aware of is that John Logan originally wrote the script and he was left alone unchecked during the writing process. And I think it must have been about maybe 2 months to shoot or whatever. And that was when the producers looked at the script and they were not happy. And by this time, Wade and Purvis and Wade, they had left because from what I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they had originally left after Skyfall. I think they were done with Bond, but they got recalled back to fix the mess that John Logan had made, and they literally had a matter of weeks to try and fix it. So, which is why the film just feels not so great. Regarding Blofeld, whatever you want to call it. After watch, I've tried to sort of understand why they would take that route, and I'm not sure if you guys have seen Smallville.
Yeah.
Okay. So in that show, you've got Superman in his early years in Smallville, but you've also got Lex Luthor, and so
Mates, yeah.
they're mates, they're buddies, and the dynamic and the characterization, especially of Lex, is really, really good. And most people will say that that's the best. Michael Rosenbaum's Lex Luthor is the best interpretation of Lex Luthor. So I'm trying to think, were Eon trying to do something similar with Blofeld here? Because I can't see why they would try and connect Bond and Blofeld to be brothers, but clearly it didn't work. I can understand if they tried to go that route, but yeah, it was just a mess for me, and I just, yeah, I don't, I don't really like talking about the film too much. But yeah, no, that's my take.
It's difficult to know what the succession plan was as well, though, in terms of by the end, Bond is walking off into the sunset, retiring with his new girlfriend, and Blofeld's crawling across a bridge, seemingly like disabled. Like what was the plan?
Mm.
Anyway, sorry, I've just jumped in there. I apologize.
No.
Funny ending, isn't it?
You had Gotham as well, didn't you? Around about the time where, as if they all went to school together. All the characters.
Yeah.
Sort of, Scooby-Doo gang as well.
Overall, it is a bit of a shame, a bit of a missed opportunity, this film, I think, because it was in such a good place after Skyfall. They brought in loads of other elements. I do think retrospectively, as some of you have said, that it might have been better just for Daniel Craig's reign to stick with Quantum, or if you are introducing Spectre, have a bit of a better explanation as to what that was about, in terms of absorbing Quantum or whatever. But, I saw Christoph Waltz as Blofeld, Monica Bellucci, Leah Seydoux, who we'd seen in Robin Hood and Mission Impossible. I like that casting. Dave Bautista as a henchman. This is all brilliant. But I don't, other than Q, I agree with you on that, Kev. I wasn't quite sold on Q in Ben Wishaw's Q in Skyfall, although I've learned to appreciate it more. But I think he's at home in this film. I think we know who he is and what he's about, and there's a good dynamic. And Ray Fiennes as M, but everything else is either not firing on anywhere near all cylinders or isn't isn't quite how it should be. Like Andrew Scott as C. Um, like me, Chris, and Ernie watched The Man with the Golden Gun recently, and I was like, you know what? When Scaramanga's showing Bond around his like not layer or whatever you'd call it, and about the energy and the SOEX and all like that. I thought Blofeld showing Bond around and showing him and Madeline all the screens and everything like that. Like, as so much with this film, they've sort of got good intentions, but they just don't achieve it. They don't quite get it. The only element where I think Sam Mendes did exactly what he wanted to and knew exactly what he wanted to do is the pre-title sequence, I would probably say. Everything else is not quite. It is quite slow. The chase in Rome. Yeah, it's flat. Even a brilliant idea that in the snow with the plane, not quite there. And then as we've said enough on the rest of it. So overall, Spectre, I don't hate it. Also, something I can't believe Harry hasn't mentioned is unless you did and I wasn't listening properly, the camera filter. I don't think that really helps.
No.
It was supposed to be Daniel Craig's swan song. No pun was intended there. Obviously, there wasn't that feeling of satisfaction amongst the fans, amongst probably beyond the fans. So, and probably with Daniel Craig himself. So that's why, No Time to Die came in and why it made some of the decisions we'll come on to that it made that almost had to rectify that. And you can't, at the end of this, we've got Bond running off, done. He's with a woman, pretty much retired. So yeah, so I don't hate Spectre. I could stick it on. I'm not desperate to, but yeah, there's bits that I enjoy in it. I don't know. I think we're all of a similar mind about it here.
I didn't know what the overall view would be on Spectre. I must be honest, because above Brofeld, everyone sort of agrees. I know that they shouldn't have done that, but after that, it doesn't seem to get as many. Like you get the odd Diamonds defenders and this kind of thing. You get people like me who suddenly like Quantum of Solace. There isn't really a movement for Spectre, is there? There's not really a big fan.
Not yet.
No. Right, Kevin, we'd forgotten to mention, you did an amazing thread on Twitter about the influences of Live and Let Die on the film.
Oh, yeah. Well, Live and Let Die, as a kid, that was my favorite Bond movie for years. So that's in never leaving the top 10. That's like just one that's near and dear to my heart. So, and I'm pretty sure I've seen Craig say many times he's referenced Live and Let Die in interviews. Like it's clearly something that's influential to him as well. So yeah, I think just recently, maybe a few months ago, I was watching Spectre and just kind of saw those references. Obviously, the teaser poster where he's channeling Roger Moore with the all black in the holster, and then you've got obviously his Baron Samedi outfit in the pre-title sequence, and then you've got just the plane sequence where he crashes and the wings come off. So you have that as well. Then you've got you see Bond at his apartment. You kind of get to see him in his personal space, and then obviously he's rocking a robe as well. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't know whether or not those are intentional. I know some of them are. Obviously, the poster and the outfit in the pre-title sequence, but it could just be me really reaching for just seeing things. Even something as small as when Roger Moore is in Kananga's lair and he puts his gun on the tray and he's like, "Keep the change." And then when Bond gets to Blofeld's crater, he puts his gun on the tray, just like Roger Moore's Bond.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of really maybe coincidental, but maybe intentional. It's hard to say.
The breathtaking river chase as well.
Right? Yeah. The 14-minute river chase. With the country sheriff, all that. Yeah.
One of those two films is baggy, and it isn't Live and Let Die. So
You shouldn't stare.
Well, you shouldn't look like that.
keep watching our Daniel Craig retrospective as we go to his final James Bond film, No Time to Die.